When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Welcome to Thoughts from a Page, a member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. I'm Cindy Burnett, and I am so glad you're here. I personally select and read every book featured on the show so I can bring you thoughtful, spoiler-free author interviews. Whether you're deciding what to read next or looking for deeper insight after finishing a book, you're in the right place. I hope these conversations will enrich your reading life. In addition to the podcast, I write a monthly column, Buzz Reads, featuring my top 5 picks for each month, which is linked in the show notes. If you're looking for the best books to read this summer, don't miss my summer reading guide, also linked in the show notes. If you enjoy the show, rating and reviewing it on Apple or Spotify really helps new listeners find me. If you're looking to contribute to the show financially, you can support me on Patreon or with a one-time contribution on PayPal, Venmo, or Buy Me a Coffee. It takes a long time to grow a show, and I continue to find a larger audience thanks to you, my loyal listeners. I am so grateful. Today, Renée Ahdieh joins me to chat about Park Avenue. The beautiful cover on this one is what first drew me to this story. Once I opened the book and started reading it, it was her stellar writing that absolutely captivated me. I love the inclusion of the Korean immigrant experience, all of the Korean words and culture, rich people behaving badly, which doesn't usually work for me, but works quite well here, and this anonymous or mysterious narrator. I highly recommend this one. Renée is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In her spare time, she likes to dance salsa and collect shoes. The first few years of her life were spent in a high-rise in South Korea. Consequently, Renée enjoys having her head in the clouds. She and her family live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome, Renée. How are you today?
I'm doing so well, Cindy. Thank you so much for setting aside this time to chat with me.
I'm so glad you're here. I loved Park Avenue. Your writing is just beautiful. I never wanted to put the book down anytime I was reading it. And I saw that you got a starred Kirkus review. That's a tough one. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's my first time ever getting a starred Kirkus review. I've been fortunate in my career across the last 10 plus years to get other reviews that were starred. And so it was very gratifying to get a starred Kirkus review.
I'm sure it is. Well, why don't we start out with you giving me a quick synopsis of Park Avenue for those that haven't read it yet?
Absolutely. So Park Avenue is a mashup of Crazy Rich Asians and Succession. It is about a badly behaving billionaire Korean family in the K-beauty space. And this young sort of striving lawyer, her name is Gia, who gets roped into representing the Park family as they kind of go on this, they're trying to figure out what their estranged father, so it's 3 adult children in this family. They're all in their 30s, and they're trying to find out what their father has done with the bulk of their family's money, because he's been cheating on their mother, who is dying of cancer, and his sort of side chick is pregnant now, and he wants to marry her. So he's trying to divorce their mother, and he has squirreled away a large percentage of their fortune. And so they hire Gia, this young lawyer, at this up and coming, not up and coming, at a New York City firm. She's an up and coming lawyer at this New York City firm. And to me, I really wanted to compare and contrast 2 kinds of Korean immigrant experiences. Very sort of like, there's a lot of parallels in these 2 families' journeys, but their lived experience now at this point is extremely different, because Gia comes from a working class family. Her parents own a bodega in Queens. And obviously the Park family, they're billionaires now, and these children have had access to every luxury and every privilege you could possibly imagine. And Gia has desperately wanted most of her life to be able to provide her family and herself with these little luxuries. And so sort of, asking yourself, why do we all work so hard? What is the purpose behind all this hard work and striving? And what really is at the core of everyone's experience, irrespective of their backgrounds and their wealth? And I really wanted to explore that from the lens of Korean immigrant families, because my mother is Korean, and I have a lot of ties to the Korean community and a lot of love for that community. So.
And it seems like that community is having quite the moment with K-pop and K-dramas and all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot tell you, when I, as a child in the United States, after my family moved back from Korea, because I spent the first few years of my life in Korea, I desperately wanted to sort of erase the Korean part of me, that was in the 80s and the 90s. And I just really wanted to assimilate. I didn't want to have a mom who cooked, quote unquote, weird food that smelled weird. I wanted to have, the turkey sandwich for lunch. And I didn't want to have anything to do with Korean culture. I wanted to sort of erase it, which is so sad, but it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're a kid who just wants to fit in. And it's so gratifying now to see everyone's interest in not just Korean culture, but like the food and the music and people wanting to visit. And it has been wonderful to watch everybody getting into Korean beauty, because I'm really passionate about Korean beauty. So it's been really great.
Well, one of the things I liked about the book was that you intersperse Korean language and culture and food throughout. I felt like I learned a lot, and it was so interesting. And it's wonderful to see that happening in books now, because I feel like for a while you really didn't see words in other languages and people would call that out. But I think it makes the story authentic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember I was actually reflecting on this with one of my good friends. When my book Flame in the Mist came out back in 2017, that is a book that's based in a fantasy feudal Japan. One of the early trade reviews was actually critical of my use of Japanese language. They thought it was too much Japanese in a book about Japan. It would be a struggle for Western readers to understand what was going on. And I remember feeling like my skin got hot, and I felt embarrassed, and I was very worried, that the book wouldn't work out. It was a success, thankfully. But I remember with this one, I didn't have that fear at all. And so I do see it as positive strides forward, despite all of the negativity we're being bombarded with, I feel like, every day. I do think that there are aspects of our society that are changing for the better, because what was considered with Flame in the Mist to be possibly a detraction from, the novel's ability to succeed is now, for me, something that a lot of my friends who are coming from all kinds of backgrounds are like, just like you said, Cindy, they're very excited to learn more about the Korean culture and learn new words. And I think that's wonderful.
And how odd would it be if your Korean characters weren't using Korean words? I just don't understand that. But it is nice to see some progress being made. And I want to say to people, have you never heard of Google? I don't know. I find that just fascinating.
I know. Yeah, I think too, I think that people they struggle to sit with discomfort. And I think that we're watching our society change, probably a lot slower than some of us would like. But sitting with that discomfort of being in a situation where I don't know what this means, or I might have to suss this out on my own. I might have to use context clues, like to exercise different parts of your brain as you're reading. I think that what we're seeing is the discussion around sitting with some discomfort as no longer just being this thing to avoid. And I'm thankful for it.
I agree completely. So Gia is very focused on a Birkin bag. She sees it when she's young, and that kind of becomes her symbol for all that she hopes to attain. I thought that was such a clever way to represent her aspirations and her struggles as the child of immigrants. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think it's a little bit of social commentary too on Korean culture, modern Korean culture, because I do see so many facets of Korean culture as being wonderful and fun and worthy of discussion. There is definitely a sense of materialism running through Korean culture, whether you're in Korea, or you're a Korean American. A lot of this striving around labels. I'm definitely somebody who has succumbed to some of it too. And I think it is so much about what Gia is saying, because I think it's very easy to say to somebody who is going after material goods and sees those as benchmarks of success, to be critical of them on a moral level or an ethical level. But I think for me, I really wanted to sort of use it as a representation of something much deeper within her, of this need to feel like she's a success, not just for herself, but for the sake of her whole family, because her parents made so many sacrifices to come over here. And I think anyone who has relatives who are immigrants or who is the child of immigrants like I am, I think that really resonates with people, because I think we're all, for better or for worse, we have these grand expectations on our shoulders. And if your parents haven't articulated them, you still know in the back of your mind that so many sacrifices that I think that I would not be able to make right now. I would not be able to uproot my entire family, to move to another country, to have to learn a language I didn't know yet, and completely be alienated from the culture I'd grown up with my entire life. And I think we all feel, the children of immigrants, this very strong just responsibility to take care of our family and make their sacrifices worth it. And I think the Birkin for me was really encapsulating all of that, because it's this unattainable symbol of wealth. And at the end of the day, it's just a bag, but the bag also represents history. Like if you look back into the history of Hermes was this big, they made saddles. A lot of it was for equestrian stuff, boots and saddles. And they were famous for their leather and the way that they stitched things by hand. So there's an artisan aspect to Hermes too that I've always admired. And I think that for Gia, having that representation, that physical manifestation is really important, because it's so easy when you're working with like a nebulous idea of what success is to continuously move the benchmark. I'm making X amount of money, still not good enough. Next year, I need to make X amount of money. And I love the idea of her being able to carry around the symbol of her success.
It's a symbol that will represent success to her, but it will also represent success to everyone else. And that's another thing that I liked about that, was that everyone will know she's attained success. And that has to be such a satisfying feeling, to feel like, okay, if I'm going to set this goal and finally attain it, not only will I know I've attained it, but everyone else will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the story mainly follows Gia as we learn more about her and as everything unfolds. But there's also this mysterious narrator that is interspersed throughout. I loved this. I was constantly trying to figure out who it was, and my mind is just ping-ponging all over the place. Did you always have that perspective there?
I did always have that perspective there. I think a lot of it was, when I was younger, I really loved Gossip Girl. The television show Gossip Girl was one of the things that I watched, in my late teens and early 20s, and just fell in love with the fashion, fell in love with the way that they romanticized New York City. And I loved the idea of this anonymous narrator. And then more recently, I'm very fortunate to call Sarah MacLean, who's an author of some of my most favorite books in the world, a really dear friend. And she actually then introduced me to reading Julia Quinn's stuff. And I loved what she was doing with what Julia Quinn was doing with Bridgerton. And I think Julia is lovely as well. And this idea, again, of this anonymous narrator, kind of, a little bit playing a modern court jester, because I always loved that in Shakespeare's plays, how you would think that this character is meant purely for the sake of levity, but often what they're doing is they're calling out people to their face. And because they're using the guise of humor and this sense of mystery around their intentions, people don't take it as seriously. But at the core, there's so much truth to what they're saying. And it is that mirror, I feel like, a world of extreme privilege. It warrants. I think that there needs to be somebody calling people out. There needs to be a court jester. So...
Well, I loved it. And also, it's a good way to impart some information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Through I guess, it's definitely an unreliable lens, I would say, but also through a lens that doesn't shy away from saying uncomfortable truths, just to go back to that idea of discomfort.
Exactly. The Park family's wealth stems from their ultra-successful Korean beauty brand, which you mentioned earlier. They're worth $1 billion, and they're very well known. Was it fun to create those characters and to bring their wealthy lifestyle to life? And did anyone inspire any of them?
Oh my gosh. Oh, this was so fun to do this, because I think that it has been a treat to sort of incorporate, because I grew up watching Korean dramas, and Korean dramas are now so popular, even among Western audiences, which again, it delights me. And if you had told me that, 15, 20 years ago, I would not have believed it. But one of the things I love about Korean dramas when they're done really well is they really capture emotions, a range of emotions, sort of like unabashedly, like very close to straddling the line of almost cheesy, but it feels so real and in the moment, and very like engaging, and there's a popcorn quality to it, because you're just like, you just can't stop, you can't put it down. And I love that about Korean dramas, and being able to do this for a Western audience and take what I loved about Korean dramas and put them on the page was so fun. And also, again, just to give people a little bit of a peek behind a curtain. I am not a billionaire, but I am in a situation where I get the opportunity through the gift of this career to spend a lot of time doing research, to get to try food at a really fancy restaurant, or get to travel the world, and be able to sort of speak to people who have had really unique experiences. One of the conversations I enjoyed so much is, one of my neighbors is a big collector of cars, and he's a big collector of supercars. And one of the characters in the Park family, his name is Minsu Park, he's the youngest son, is an avid car lover, and he loves imported cars. And there was a scene that I wrote about with all these different supercars, basically like going through upper New York State on this like sort of Sunday jaunt, which is actually a thing that happens. I mean, it happens here. I'm in North Carolina. There's a group of people gentlemen who have supercars, who will drive to the mountains of Western North Carolina just for a 2-hour jaunt through the hills. And just being able to speak to him about it and his experience, getting him to let me take one of these cars out so I could really know what it was like to get behind the wheel of one of them. And also just to lend some credence to those chapters, to me, is so fun, because I didn't want to just be on the page, talking in broad terms about this Lamborghini or this Ferrari. I wanted to speak with a specificity that would be convincing to somebody who loved cars as well.
And what about the luxury goods that the 3 siblings have? That had to be fun to inhabit that world for a little while, too.
Oh my gosh, it was so fun. I remember my husband and I, he's always so great about humoring me on these, they were very fun research trips. We went to Las Vegas, and we went to all of these really fancy designer shops so that I could see all of the jewelry and all the different stuff, and I could actually hold it and try it on. And I just thought that was so cool, because to me, that's just part of what makes the book, any book, that immersive, transportive experience. The thing that will obviously unite anybody, irrespective of perspective, is the humanity in everybody, the emotions. But these sort of sensory details, I think, are what really, for me, especially as a reader, allow me to lose track of time. And as a writer, that is always my goal. How do I write this in such a way that people aren't really paying attention to time? That's because I feel like that's something we all struggle with as adults, right? We still rarely get opportunities to lose ourselves in something. And for me, that's one of the things that I really love about being an avid reader. I get that chance, because if you look at younger kids, I have 2 children, and they will just lose themselves in the things that they love, and they don't care about the time. They don't care about anything except the pure enjoyment of being able to color or paint or draw or read or anything like that. And I think we lose that a little as we get older, and we become a little bit jaded. So I love the opportunity of being able to put something like that on the page, in the hopes that I get to help a reader, so maybe someone like me, lose a little bit of themselves in a story.
And make it feel genuine and immersive, which I mentioned up front. I did not want to put your book down. And to me, that is a sign of a really good book, because it doesn't happen all that often.
Thank you so much. That is like the highest compliment for me. I remember being 12 years old, the moment when I first started to ask myself, or not even ask myself, when I started to really think, I might want to do something with writing. It was when I was reading Anne Rice's Queen of the Damned. And I was not supposed to be reading that book. I had been forbidden from reading it. And I literally took it off the shelves of my father's little bookshelf thing because it had a curse word in it. It had the title was Queen of the Damned. And I was like, haha. And I picked up this book and I completely lost myself in it. I was reading it under the covers with a flashlight so my parents wouldn't see the light coming from my room. And I was so engrossed in the story that I didn't realize it was morning until I heard the birds chirping. And I was just hypnotized by the writing. And I was asking myself, how did she do this? Like it was magic. Like how? I want to do this. I want to do this. So
That's the very best feeling. Yes. I mean, that is truly the best feeling. So I get that.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Did anyone inspire any of these characters?
You know what? So actually the story was heavily inspired by this article that I read in the New York Times. It's one of those like longer sort of editorial pieces. And it was, oh my goodness, it had to have been at this point at least 5-7 years ago. And it was this long story of this couple who had emigrated from a Scandinavian country. I want to say it was Norway, to Florida in the early 1980s. It was a man and a woman, and they'd moved to Florida. And they'd begun a couple of different companies in Florida. So they started like one of those like CD distribution companies. And then eventually they kind of moved into the space of party planning and sending out party supplies. Not unlike, I think, like Kate Middleton's family did. They were very successful in the UK with a party supply store that they could have a catalog and mail it out. So anyway, this couple did this, and they, over the course of 20 years, they created this company that was worth almost $500 million. And they had 2 children. And then all of a sudden, the husband shows up in front of the wife and is like, I want a divorce. And she's like, okay. He's like, yeah, I'm seeing somebody else. I don't want to be married to you anymore. And she's like, okay. So they decide to go to divorce attorneys, and she's just thinking to themselves, they don't have any sort of prenup, because when they came to America, they didn't have anything. And she's like, well, we're worth a lot of money, so we'll just split everything down the middle. And he shows up at the lawyer's office with documentation that shows that they only have about $13 million, which she's like, this is not possible. We have properties, we have boats, we have all this stuff that's worth so much more than that. What is going on here? And then she embarked on this journey after hiring a law firm and a forensic accountant that stretched over 2 years, that showed that he had basically for 5 years been squirreling away money all over the world, like in the Cook Islands, in Switzerland, in the Cayman Islands. And they had to track all of this down. And it turned out at the end of the day that he had hidden over $400 million from her, and he had been trying to essentially rob her of her fair share. And I remember reading this, and it was one of those things where it's like, the truth is stranger than fiction. This is the coolest story. And it was so engrossing. It felt like a thriller. And I was thinking to myself, this would be a really fun book to write. But I would only want to do it, I think, from the lens of Korean immigrants, because I think that would add a layer that I would really enjoy reading. And again, a perspective, I think, that I hope that people are interested in seeing and hearing, because it's not something that's been done much in Western literature. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I agree with that completely. Can you even imagine the betrayal? First, married to this person, you help them build this business. They say they want a divorce. You're already thinking, what in the world? And then you realize for 5 years they've been doing that?
Oh, and that he's been meticulously planning his exit.
Right.
And it was, again, this really wild story where she knew that they were becoming disconnected. He was partying with a lot of other wealthy men that he'd met here and there. And he would say he was going for work trips, and he would be gone for like a week, and she'd be there with her kids. And he was like, he kept saying stuff about how his new friends were saying he was mismanaging the money. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. And she never asked questions, because it had never dawned on her that, again, the father of your children, this man that you moved to this country with and built a life with and a successful company with would do something like this. And I think that the emotional element of that really spoke to me too, especially from the perspective of, if we look at Park Avenue, Jenny Park, who is the matriarch of the family, and how that must have landed on her as a character, and how it then has this ripple effect through their family, because it causes the kids to have to choose sides, have loyalty, and then the succession element of the story comes in that you're not ever sure, I think, at any point in the book, whether or not all of these kids are on an actual side or if they're just playing the entire game to see who can win.
I agree with that. And that was also fun to try to determine who was doing what, but also the impact on those kids. And I thought you portrayed that very well. They're grown up, but to have all of this happening in your family that you felt you had a decent upbringing, everything's going well, maybe your parents don't always get along, but nothing to the extent of your poor mother has cancer, your father now has this other girlfriend that's pregnant, he's trying to hide all the money. I mean, that would be so damaging. And you portrayed that well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It was so fun to write the three Park siblings. They are so damaged in their own way. And I spent a lot of time actually talking to friends who were therapists, because I wanted to make sort of, I guess, their experiences and their childhood traumas, I wanted them to manifest in a way that, again, would ring true, because each of them are experiencing this in different ways, and the impact on each of them is very different. And I just thought that spoke to my understanding, because I have two siblings as well. We grew up in the same household, and I think the way that we went through difficulties in childhood definitely landed on each of us in very distinct ways. And it was so fun because all of them are so different. And especially writing the scenes where the siblings are squabbling, they were emotionally taxing to write, but also very fun to see put on the page, because that's their humanity, right? It doesn't matter if you're somebody who doesn't get to have like a $25,000 bottle of whiskey like the Park kids get to do when they go out to party and drink and club. But the fighting, I feel like that feeling of being around a dinner table with your siblings, and that anger and not being able to say anything, or like somebody kicking you under the table, or like, everyone quietly poking at each other. It doesn't matter how old you are. I feel like that rings true for anyone with siblings.
I agree completely with you when you're talking about siblings and your siblings and how everybody deals with things differently, but they also perceive things differently. And I think that's always what's really interesting. You could all have been at the exact same table, exact same discussion, but everybody comes away with a different idea or thought or feeling about it.
Absolutely. And again, the validity of everybody's position too. Just because I don't share the same perspective that my sister or my brother have on something that happened in our past doesn't mean that one perspective is more valid than the other. I think I think getting to that headspace is hopefully a sign of emerging maturity, right?
I agree completely. It's hard to get there sometimes, but when you do, you're like, okay, good. And now I'm understanding better. Well, did you have a favorite of the siblings? I know that's a hard question to ask, but I just kept thinking about that as I was reading your book. Like, was there one of them that she liked better than the other two?
I would say that, so we have the twins, the two older twins are Sora and Susie, and the youngest is a boy. His name is Minsu. And I say boy, they're in their 30s. Mid-30s and up. And I thought at the very beginning, I had so much fun writing Susie, because Susie is such an outrageous character to write. She's somebody who all of her childhood traumas and all of her fears and all of her worries have made her kind of put on this very, almost like an entertaining, like a show for everybody else, where she's just trying to be as salacious, as wild as possible, and to say anything to provoke a reaction. And that's really strongly contrasted to her older sister, Sora. So Sora and Susie are twins, who is very, on the surface, seemingly reserved and very sort of cold and aloof. And I had so much fun writing Susie at the beginning, but I think there was something about Sora, especially as the story unfurled, that really tugged at my heartstrings. She is damaged in so many different ways and has not begun to process that damage. And the facade that she has constructed over the course of her 30 plus years as, being alive is so intricate that I feel like dismantling it is something that would be for her such a Herculean task. And it's just so much easier for her to maintain this really carefully constructed facade. But then beneath it is this rage. And I had such a good time sort of depicting that rage, because to me, it was very real. I feel like so many children of immigrants especially immigrants that are coming from cultures that maybe their parents or the generation of people who raised them didn't really encourage as much, like the development of EQ, like their emotions, like talking about emotions, understanding where they're coming from, and not making it a thing to be embarrassed about. In the Korean culture, we have this phrase, it's chama. And chama means if you're struggling or you're angry or you're sad, somebody will tell you, usually an elder, chama, 조금만 참아라, which means just deal with it. Just deal with it. And the context of that is, don't show that you're having a hard time. You need to just, swallow it, bury it, deal with it later. And I think that if you do this long enough, the rage, the simmering rage underneath the surface is inevitable. And I really felt that with Sora.
I did too. And yes, eventually it will blow because you're tamping it down, and at some point you just can't do that anymore.
Absolutely. And she has good reason. I mean, like the betrayal with Sora, I feel like is so layered. I don't want to be too spoilery, but I will say that at the beginning of the story, Susie and Sora, who are again twins, they have been each other's best friends for most of their lives. They haven't spoken to each other in 2 years because of a betrayal that occurred in their family. And I mean, again, with the same quality there, Susie broke my heart as well, too. Susie was a character that you just saw her dealing with her pain in such a toxic way as well. I mean, it's highly entertaining to watch because she's, to go back to the court jester thing, she's a little bit of the court jester in their family. And I just like, they all broke my heart in different ways. And getting to explore each of their psyches was so fun. Just as it was so fun to get to explore Gia's perspective, because she's looking at this and there's an element of disgust that she definitely has for the Park family, because she's like, you have everything. You have literally lived the American dream and you're all so profoundly unhappy. How could you squander these riches, not just material riches, but these opportunities that have been given to you? But then as the story unfolds for Gia as well, the way that she's able to really empathize with them in a way that she did not think was possible at the beginning of the story. They're so different from her. She's like, there's nothing likable about any of them.
I agree with that. I really liked both Sora and Susie so much, and at different times really felt sorry for them, empathized with them, and understood eventually where they were coming from.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is your adult debut. You've written YA in the past, that's correct?
Yes. I have mostly YA, and then I also had a picture book that came out last year, which I have to say I selfishly wrote just so I could read to my children.
Oh, I love that. So is it really different? And when you wrote YA, it was mainly fantasy. Is that also right?
Historical fantasy. So very, very different.
Okay, so you pivoted to adult books and away from fantasy. So tell me about that.
Well, okay, so I think for me, I have always been a huge lover of fantasy books and books that have an element of magic to them. And I think a lot of it goes back to my childhood love of like Anne Rice's stories, books about vampires, werewolves, and fairies, all this kind of stuff. And my love for books like Lord of the Rings. I remember one of the first series I really fell in love with was Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain. The Prydain Chronicles, about this boy who's a reluctant hero. And these books I just loved. They just created a different world for me in my head. And I believe they were all heavily based in Welsh lore. And I have always loved fantasy books. I've always loved being able to take people out of a different time and place. And when you add the element of magic into it, you add, to me, an element of everything being possible. And I love that. I love to read that. I love to write that. But I also really love writing romances. I love, especially for YA audiences, the buildup of, feelings of uncertainty, this idea that everything is fresh and new and there's a first for everything, that first kiss, that first time someone holds your hand and the way it sends a shiver down your spine or something like that. I love writing about it. And I think that being able to write Park Avenue, I really got to explore parts of like the psyche from a modern lens that I hadn't gotten to explore before because I was writing historical fantasy and writing in a language that, because again, when you're writing historical fantasy, the way that you structure a sentence, the way that you structure the narrative is very different from writing something that's contemporary, and especially something that's contemporary from a more adult lens, a women's fiction lens. I think that the onus when I'm writing about YA books, I do have to constantly tell myself, would I want my teenage nieces reading this? Is this going to spark important discussion that needs to happen? So like consent on the page, for instance, and, like, what are you looking for in a potential love interest? There has to be almost like, not moralistic, but I feel like, again, I have a bigger duty to my reader to impart something important on them. And I think with adult books, I get to explore the darkness in human psyche. And I don't necessarily have to not make apologies for it, but I don't necessarily have to explain myself the way I would if I were writing for a younger audience. And that was really fun because you really get to delve into the darkness that exists, I think, in all of us and humanize it, but then also make no apologies for these sort of unredemptive behavior that I am hopeful will obviously cause some sort of dialogue with people. Meaningful dialogue. And so that was really fun. I felt a little bit like I didn't have the same constraints, even though writing fantasy, you have fewer constraints in that sense too. But the constraints on emotion and experience are different, which I really enjoyed writing for Park Avenue.
And I'm sure you're world building when you're writing historical fantasy, and that's probably a little bit different. I mean, you still are building a world in Park Avenue, but not a creative world like you would in fantasy.
Absolutely. And I think that there are like pluses and minuses to it, right? Because if you're writing a fantasy book and you're creating this world and creating food and clothing, you don't necessarily have to worry if you get something wrong. There's not somebody who was alive. So my series, The Beautiful, that takes place in 1872 New Orleans. No one today was alive in 1872 New Orleans to be like, actually, that street doesn't smell like that. And that didn't happen here. But the funny thing about writing in a contemporary space is you will inevitably get somebody who's like, that's not right. That's not how it was. I was just there last week. So the onus is different too, again.
Definitely. And I would think that you would encounter that a little bit when you're trying to create this luxury world as well, because just trying to make sure you get those details right.
Absolutely. I remember when I started working on Park Avenue, I actually joined this secret Facebook group, which I just think is so fascinating, of Hermes lovers. My intention behind this was obviously I was trying to collect like research stuff because I'm not somebody who collects a bunch of Birkin bags. And when you're dealing with people in these spaces who are talking about like crafted artisan pieces of, I mean, Hermes bags are considered works of art. And they do, as I say in the book, they appreciate better than gold does. And so being able to be a lurker in this Facebook group and interact with people later on and ask questions and really understand, what is the pro of this kind of leather versus this kind of leather? Why is it so hard to get a bag? All of that stuff is just so fascinating. And I think to me, so necessary because there will be somebody who will come into this book and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, actually, she does know what she's talking about. She's not just talking about this bag as though she just was like, okay, I'm just going to throw in this random Hermes bag because they're so expensive and everybody knows how difficult they are to get. So again, I think as a writer, your responsibility is to do your research always.
Exactly. Because it can really pull you out of the story. I mean, I wouldn't know enough about Birkin bags for that part to pull me out, but I did think it was interesting and you clearly had done your research with all the details. But it does frustrate me when I'm reading a book and something is incorrect and it pulls me out. So I get that.
Absolutely. And I think, too, we have, thankfully, a more discerning audience, especially when it comes to writing from different cultures. People are going to come at you if you're not taking the time. I remember watching Jackie Woodson speak a couple of years ago before the pandemic. People were asking her, are you okay with a writer who isn't Black writing about the Black experience? And she sort of paused, and then she said, in that way that Jackie does, because she's such a beautiful speaker and so eloquent, she said something to the effect of, look, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't write, but if you are going to write about my family's experience, I hope you've sat at my table, my family's table. I hope you know how my uncle laughs. I hope you know how my grandmother fixed this dish or this dish. And I think what she's saying is, if you're going to do it, your responsibility is to do the research. You just can't change, the color of a character to satisfy some, need for inclusivity, which to me is just also really wrong, without then doing the necessary work to portray that character's lived experience, even if it's not your own. And again, even going back to fantasy, Tolkien didn't know any elves. Tolkien didn't know any, urukai. He created them, but he made them with perspectives and a world, and you have a responsibility to convey that in a convincing way. And if somebody comes to you and says, this doesn't ring true, you then need to go back to the drawing board. You need to learn. So it's very important.
Absolutely. Take the time to do the research and think about what you're creating.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your title and your cover. I'm always fascinated by how both come about. Was Park Avenue always the title?
I was very lucky about that. Yeah, that was always the title of it. And I just thought it was really fun because initially I had toyed around with the idea of calling it The Parks of Park Avenue. But the more I thought about it, and I never put that on the title heading. It was always Park Avenue. And then I sort of thought to myself, would it be funnier to do The Parks of Park Avenue? I was like, no, I think Park Avenue really speaks to the story in so many different ways. And I think it's fun because when you're coming from the Korean culture, parks are so you have parks are like the Smiths. So there's so many parks in Korea that it's just I have a really good friend who's Indian. It's like having the last name Patel, right? So everybody has the last name Parks in Korea. So I love a park in Korea. So I really like the idea. It's like Park and Lee and Kim. These are all very popular surnames. And I just really loved the play on the title. And then the cover for me, oh my gosh, I just feel like that there was an element of kismet to that too, because it's a piece of art actually. And they always had said at the beginning that they wanted to select a piece of existing art and sort of use it as the backdrop for the cover. And so they sent several different artists' works to me. And at no point in time did I know who the artist was early in the process. And I think all of us really sort of homed in on this piece of art early on. And we were like, this is so beautiful. I love it so much. I think it's perfect. I love the colors. I love the texture. And then when we started talking to the gallery that represented the artist, we found out she's Korean. And again, at no point had we known that she was Korean in selecting her. And it just felt so right and so great. I was so thankful for that process.
Oh, I love that. That's a wonderful story. And it is a stunning cover.
It is so stunning. And her name is Kira Nam Green. And it was that shivers down your spine moment again, where you're just like, wow, this was meant to be.
Exactly. Kismet. Well, before we wrap up, Renée, what have you read recently that you really liked?
Oh my gosh. So I think I'm a little late to the ball game on this one, but one of my really dear friends, Alwyn Hamilton, who is a writer in London, she has really been trying to tell me to read this Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. If you haven't read it, it is so fun. It is so well written. Loved it. I think it's great. And then I have been really fortunate right now to get an advanced copy of my good friend Sarah MacLean's, also her contemporary debut, which is These Summer Storms. If you haven't read anything by Sarah MacLean, she writes amazing Regency romance series. And she has been somebody who I have admired her for so many years. She's so sharp. She's so fun and such a wonderful cheerleader and friend. I feel very, very blessed to always have her guidance and her in my corner. But her contemporary debut is called These Summer Storms, and it's very much in the same vein as Park Avenue. So if you're a big fan of, rich people behaving badly and, interpersonal, interfamily, tense dynamics, I think you would really love it. And she's just such a sharp and witty writer. It's so fun. Those two books are the ones that are on my nightstand right now.
And Emily Wilde is a series, isn't that correct?
It is. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries is the first. And I just finished it. And I believe that there are 2 more.
I think that's right, because my daughter loves fantasy. She's 22 and reads every fantasy book out there. And she and a friend are reading these together, or kind of buddy reading them. And she keeps raving about how good they are.
They're so good. And they're so fun. And they're so, first the writing. And that's something for me that I really love. I really love a fantasy book where the writer has completely immersed himself, almost made a new, cadence to language, a new and they're scholars, they're Oxford scholars. So even the way they talk is very it's very nose up in the air, and it's really cool. But it's poking fun at itself too in a very clever way. I've enjoyed it a lot. So
oh, good. She's going to be happy to hear that you recommended it. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Renée, for coming on my show and taking the time to chat with me. This was such a wonderful discussion.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Cindy. And I so appreciate all of your support and your excitement around Park Avenue. It means the world to me. I don't know that if you had told me when I started writing so many years ago, trying to become a professional writer, that if I had written a book that was from the lens of Korean American immigrants, that it would be so wonderfully received with people from all walks of life that I wouldn't have believed it. So I have so much appreciation for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Are your business expenses playing hide and seek? With Uber for Business, the small spends that slip through the cracks, like rides and meals, go right where you need them. Because it integrates with leading expense platforms, you can say goodbye to surprise costs, missing dollars, or chasing receipts. Everything's track downable. Uber for Business. Make small steps that make a big impact. Learn more at uber.com/small steps.
It's summer. Time to enjoy long days, lazy nights, and great food. Because Uber Eats has deals all summer long. So, when hunger strikes, don't sweat it. Delicious deals are just a tap away on Uber Eats. Enjoy all your favorite grocery items delivered straight to you. Get ice cream, soda, and snacks from your favorite stores like Wegmans and CVS and make the most of every moment. Now that sounds like a good summer. Order now on Uber Eats. Terms apply. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I would love to connect with you on Instagram or Facebook, where you can find me at Thoughts from a Page. If you enjoy the show and have a moment to rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, I would really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference. And please tell all of your friends about Thoughts from a Page. Word of mouth does wonders to help the show grow. The book discussed in this episode can be purchased at my bookshop storefront, and the link is in the show notes. I hope you'll tune in next time.